见。Test, test. Test. Test, test. 1, 2. 那你现在还在北京？
对呀、我一直在北京，而且在北京Beijing Park University。对，我一直在那里。虽然我有的时候原来是代表北京去比赛，但是其实我是北京体育大学的人。对，我现在一直在那儿是老师嘛，然后现在带那个北京体育大学的武术代表队。对，也是要带他们比赛啊这样子，对，跟高水平比赛。
你有学生在这边吗？
Judge number 9, Zhou Haojun, Germany.
10号裁判麦伦托内桑蒂斯，希腊。
Judge number 10, Miron, Greece.
11号裁判薛天尼，印度尼西亚。
Judge number 11, Vania, Indonesia.
套路检查员竹中保人，日本。
Taolu routine inspector, Yasuhito, Japan.
2号场地裁判长塔迪亚娜·库普利亚诺娃，俄罗斯。
Arena number 2, head judge, Tatiana Kupriyanova, Russia.
1号裁判李敏华，泰沙伊，瑞典。
Judge number 1, Li Minghua, Sweden.
2号裁判斯维茨维林，以色列。
Judge number 2, Sui Zuiri, Israel.
3号裁判裴东喜，韩国。
Judge number 3, Pei Yu-hee, Korea.
4号裁判艾米尔·德哈穆德，土耳其。
Judge number 4, Emil, Turkey.
5号裁判德尔肖德·巴扎洛夫，乌兹别克斯坦。
Judge number 5, Dilshad, Uzbekistan.
6号裁判帕克里。
晚上好, and we are back this evening at the Minhang Indoor Stadium in Shanghai, China for the second session of day 1 of the 15th World Wushu Championships. With over 1,000 athletes participating from over 100 countries and regions combined, in the next few days we'll be seeing some of the top athletes from around the world. I'm Anthony Chen, and I will be your commentator here alongside with Alan Tang with our focus on Field of Play 2, where we will be viewing men's Xingyiquan and women's Taijijian. We also have Mario Martinez and Paula Amidani viewing men's Nanquan on Field of Play 1.
If you missed the action this morning in Field of Play 1, we had the men's Daoshu competition, where there was a strong display by Team China and as well Team Malaysia, Singapore, and many others in the men's Daoshu event. At the end of the day, now in field number 2, we're going to be introducing one of the traditional Wushu events, the Xingyiquan, which is the men's traditional bare hand routine. As we're about to begin, we have introduced the judging panel of today's event, and we will now follow that by introducing the athletes. How many people do we have competing in this event this evening, Anthony?
So in this evening, we've got about 16 competitors competing in the men's Xingyiquan, and later on, we'll have women's Taijijian, where we'll have 23 female athletes. And on Field of Play 1, if you're joining us on that one, you'll be seeing men's Nanquan with 56 competitors.
So here we go. The introduction of the athletes representing men's Xingyiquan and the men's Nanquan in Field of Play number 1.
Yeah, and Alan, as you were saying, this is a traditional event, so in terms of the judging panel, there will be less judges, is that correct?
Correct. There is no difficulty component, so in that way, there are 2 panels of judges, the A judges, which are in charge of the quality of movement, and the B judges, who are in charge of the overall performance. As we mentioned earlier in our discussion, A judges are in charge of looking at the quality of the technical movements of the athletes and are in charge of deducting for any misinterpretation or mistakes by the athletes in their movements and their performance. Whereas in Group B, the judges, they're in charge of the overall performance and provide a score based on the performance merit.
And in this case, without the Group C panels, the Group A will be out of 5, and the Group B will be also out of 5.
Correct.
With a combined score of 10.
So we have a total of 5 judges for Group A, is that correct, Anthony?
In this case, there will be only 3 judges for Group A and 3 judges for Group C, or sorry, B. Or I'm sorry, there are actually 5 judges in Group B.
So a total of 8 judges.
That's correct.
And how does the Group A judge work, Anthony, in terms of how do they deduct these marks and what are they looking for in terms of the criteria of deductions?
So, Alan, because the Group A are focused a lot on angles, heights of kicks, positions of the fist, the palm, the foot placement, the stance work. We have 3 judges situated on across the whole panel, and so they're all watching the athlete in different angles. So 2 out of 3 of these judges have to confirm for a deduction to go through.
So in terms of a deduction, they're looking for a particular way that the athletes are performing a movement, and if they don't do it correctly, then those judges will indicate it. And I believe that within a 3-second period, they have to indicate that code of deduction.
That's correct. The code has to match, and it has to be within 3 seconds for any of it to go through.
So aside from movements, what else can they deduct for?
Aside from the movements, it's particularly a lot of swaying, loss of balance is what we're going to see here for the deduction codes.
So if an athlete loses his balance or kind of stumbles or shakes, then the judges are looking at that and deducting based on that code.
That's correct.
And in terms of the Group B judges who are in charge of providing a score, what is the typical framework or the positioning that they're going to give that mark out of 5?
So there are about 11 different placements of skill, and of those you have a superior of 3, the next group which is average, and then 3 of inferior. And so we're looking at most of these athletes, if they're really high level, will be scoring above a 3.7.
So out of 5, a 3.7 would be a really pretty good score. Then somewhere, say, between 2 and 2.2 and 3 is average, you would say, or?
2.3, I'm expecting us to see about a 3 range for a lot of these athletes.
Because the score is out of 5 on this.
Correct.
So here we have it, our first athlete for the men's Xingyiquan.
We have Turkey's Dursun Ali Kapoglu, who also competed in men's Taolu earlier today.
So there's no difficulty component, so what we're seeing is all based on fundamental movements in the Shingi style, which includes a lot of striking, footwork. I see them stamping the floor quite a bit. Is that an indication of power in their footwork?
That's an indication of power and control and a lot of explosive work.
So we're looking at stability in the footwork and, of course, accuracy of strikes, showcase of defensive movements as a reflection of this style of the Chinese martial arts.
That's correct. And Alan, so these traditional forms do not have to be 1 minute 20. Is that correct?
These forms, there is still a minimum requirement of 1 minute.
Yeah.
That's right. So sometimes they're choreographed that they're slightly shorter. However, it's still a reflection of a minimum of 1 minute without a maximum, but them showcasing that style of martial art and an indication of its application, the basic elements of power, strength, balance. And the final score we have is 8.763. And we can see that for his Group A scoring, he had a perfect score of 5.0, so no real deduction for any particular errors. And the remainder of 3.76 was his mark for overall performance.
Next up, we have Thailand's Sujinda Yangrangorin, and he's also competed in men's Taolu earlier this morning. With a strong performance, 9.280, but not enough for the podium.
So we see a lot of rhythm in this form of wushu, some quick movements, short distance attacks.
And opposed to the other contemporary events, the use of the carpet is a little bit different. Is that right?
Well, we don't see such a wide range of motion because many of the footwork and as well the strikes are much shorter, so they don't have that coverage of the carpet. However, it's still an indication in the performance of the athlete in how he utilizes it. Because definitely you don't want to choreograph your routine where it's just stationary in one place, but as well, you don't have the long range of movements in order to cover corner to corner per se.
And along with that, the stances are a little bit higher, well more positioned for combat. And in this case, we're not really trying to display any kind of flexibility. There we have it, Sujinda Yangrungroen of Thailand. And final score, 9.203 with a perfect 5 points on the...
And a 4.203 rating for his Group B or overall performance. And as we can see here, is very different from the contemporary wushu routines where there really isn't areas that the judges can deduct from. There are no requirements for low stances. There's no requirements for particular kicks because there are low kicks in this style of wushu. So really, it's up to the athlete to maintain his balance, which is one of the only areas in which they can deduct for.
That's correct. And now we have Pui Seng Chong of Macau. He's placed second at the last World Wushu Championships in Kazan in this particular event. So we're expecting a very strong performance.
One of the indications of Xingyiquan is the explosiveness and the ability for the athlete to generate power and be able to display that power in his movement. It is considered an internal style of wushu, and what that means, internal style, is power, is how they develop that power, or sometimes we refer to it as chi power, through the breathing techniques, through the concentration of energy into a particular strike to any particular target.
Yeah, and particularly in Pui Seng Chong's movements, you can see it very clearly. A lot of his moves just comes from his breath instead of just an empty punch.
And during the training, you'll see many of these athletes training and practicing their breathing technique through the diaphragm in wushu. So through the diaphragm, instead of trying to breathe through the lungs, they're really generating that internal oxygen or internal strength in their breathing and trying to release it in their strikes and blocks and various offensive and defensive techniques. And you can see, especially in the slow motion, that exertion of power and force from the performer towards the target.
And there we have it, 9.343.
And that's currently good enough for first place. Added as events 2 World Championships ago, the traditional wushu routines are a big indication of how wushu is practiced around the world. Wushu, known in its tradition for defensive prowess and as well for the training of physical and health well-being, the traditional routines we see in the men's Xingyiquan and as well the women's Bagua is a majority of the martial arts, Chinese martial arts, that's practiced worldwide.
Right, that's correct, Alan. This is one of these events are some of my favorite events to watch at the World Wushu Championships. Here you can see a lot of martial element, and as you said earlier, lots of display of power, control, and a lot of strong footwork. And here we have Sweden's Jakob Pang Isaacson.
And really, when we're talking about wushu as the development of a sport, it really has its fundamental roots and basis in the traditional forms of wushu, or commonly known as kung fu. Because many people who begin the practice and training in wushu train it for the purposes of health, self-defense, and physical development. rather than just strictly training it for the purpose of competition.
That's correct. Even myself, I started off doing traditional wushu, otherwise known as kung fu.
And when we were young, we always look at the realms of Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Kung Fu Panda, and we get these different scopes of the Chinese martial arts, known for its offensive and defensive techniques. But how is this shadow boxing or individual display of Taolu a reflection of the martial arts? Because Taolu,
and there we have final score, 8.510.
good enough for fourth place. But as I was mentioning, the training of the Taolu or the shadow boxing is a big component of the wushu and the Chinese martial arts, really, because it gives a sense of coordination, agility, and physical development prior to the application of its movement.
Right. A lot of these athletes practice several hours a day for many years just to develop that strength, that power, that speed, and that footwork.
And really, it's not only used for the purpose of combat, but for the purpose of each individual's self-development in terms of their physical control.
And next up, from Egypt, we have Islam El Sayed. And we notice a common theme with all these athletes competing in Xingyiquan. A lot of the gathering of the qi, as you were mentioning initially, and then build it into a lot of explosive powers.
And in the same sense, for the Xingyiquan, there are required movements that the athletes must perform, but they are able to position them anywhere in the routine throughout their demonstration.
And from my understand, there are many different types of Xingyiquan, some that focusing on the 12 animals and then the 5 elements. And those have different hand positions and footwork just to match the type of element or animal that they're trying to achieve.
A very strong performance so far by Islam, athlete from Egypt. Very strong and stable stances. One of the big attributes in Xingyiquan. There you see a very targeted kick.
And final score, 9.216, putting him in second place.
So really, in a competition such as this, there really aren't too many elements, as we mentioned, for deduction. So most of the athletes, we do expect them to get a full 5.00 in their Group A score, unless it is obvious or particularly that they lose their balance, or what type of other mistake can they possibly make?
Falling, additional support, which does happen from time to time. Some of those stances do get lower when they're doing some pauses right after the kick. Next up, from Turkey, we have Nekmedin Erbakan Akuz. He was a bronze medalist at the 13th World Wushu Championships in Jakarta, Indonesia. So it looks like he might be a contender for the top 3, with Poi Sang Chung of Macau currently in first place with a 9.343. So as we were mentioning, some of those stances right there, those cross and sitting stances.
That's right. They're much lower, and it is possible that an athlete loses his balance on a movement like that.
And often we will see athletes use a little bit too much power and not be able to control themselves as they move into another stance. So far, a very controlled performance by Nekmedin. And here in this replay, we can see the grasping, the changing of hand positions. And final score for Nekmedin, 9.173.
So is it fair to say that an athlete scoring in the nines is doing quite well in this type of event?
That's correct. And as we were saying earlier, there are only 2 judging panels that would be making deductions. The A and the B, both with a complete score of 5 if the athlete is very strong. And so far, as you were saying, the Group A is most likely going to be a full score.
So it's really up to the Group B judges to provide the score for overall performance to determine which athlete is doing better.
Next up from Malaysia, we have Xingyiquan.
And we see some of the athletes, their uniforms are slightly different as well.
Yeah, longer sleeves is one of the biggest differences in these athletes. Very similar to Tai Chi athletes.
In the external style.
Exactly.
Or internal style, I mean.
That's correct.
Very strong performance by Sheng Yang.
As you can see, very sharp, very quick footwork, with very controlled stop.
There's quite a difference in the style of performance compared to many of the athletes we saw earlier. Do you think that he'll score quite higher because of that?
I would agree in my opinion. Like, he is definitely one of the strong competitors.
His exertion of force is very clear, and as well, it seems as though his pace and rhythm is much more forceful and powerful than many of the other athletes that we have seen earlier. A comparison of the previous athlete. And we see it, his final score 9.400, which currently places him in first place. And it was a clear indication while we were watching his routine that the rhythm was much more aggressive and exciting than the previous athletes. So I think that's a clear indication and helps our audience understand some of the requirements of Xingyiquan.
Next up from Norway, we have Jonas Thorsen Loe. Jonas is a 2019 European Kung Fu champion in this event. So, an experienced Xingyiquan competitor. And compared to our last Malaysian athlete, how would you say his footwork compares?
Well, like many of the other athletes in the Xingyiquan, he is demonstrating stability and strength. However, it's the movement across the carpet and the movement forward and backwards that is quite a big difference. The pace of the routine is much slower, although he does have explosive moments. However, the Malaysian athlete was able to chain together those movements in a much more effective manner, it seems.
That's right. It seems like his upper body, his torso, his fists, and his lower legs were all in sync with
His
every
center
attack.
of gravity was much more tied together during his routine.
There's our 360 view of our athlete with 72 cameras on the carpet.
His final score, 9.150.
That puts him in 6th place. Next up from Chile, we have Rafael Nunez Alacon. Rafael also competed in the 2019 World Kung Fu Championships in Ame earlier this year. Here we see a lot of fast fist movements.
But also you see that there's not as much stability in his stances, that it's not as grounded. The center of gravity of the performer is much more loose. So that's where I believe the judges are looking at a very, very strong center of gravity in the movement of the athlete. So I doubt that his score will be as high as the previous two athletes.
Here in the replays, we can see a lot of the powers being generated. And as you were saying, the footwork wasn't as grounded.
And especially in the slow motion, you can see the energy of the strikes and the difference in the explosiveness and the exertion of the energy from the body or from the internal breathing towards the end target.
And final score for Rafael Nunez Alacon is 9.190. Next up, we have Christoph Huynh of Germany, a bronze medalist at the last World Wushu Championships in Kazan in 2017. We'll see if his performance will get him a gold. A little slight loss of balance there. And as we were saying, Alan, that's probably one of the deduction codes for the A judging panel. And that was Christoph Wynn of Germany. We're looking at above a 9.216 to be in top 3. And here in this slow motion, we can see a little more uncommon palm positions.
As you await his final score.
If you're just joining us, we also have Field of Play 1, where we're showcasing the men's Nanquan.
His final score, 9.233, putting him in the bronze medal position.
Next up from Australia, we have Corey Johnstone.
How many traditional styles of wushu would you say that there are in the world?
You know, Alan, I think there are over 20, 30, there's hundreds from what I know.
Maybe even thousands.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, why would they choose shingi as the particular style to showcase at the Wushu Championships?
You know, I think that's because it is one of the traditional styles that was not combined to create the modern sport of wushu.
Ah, I understand. Okay.
And as we were talking about, Tangquan is a combination of quite a few northern styles, and the southern fist is also a combination of about 5 southern styles in China.
So shingi is one of the more independent styles that is popular, but that has not been utilized in wushu competition yet.
That's correct. And there we have it from Australia's Corey Johnstone. And so far in the placements, we have in gold standing,
Malaysia.
Xingyiquan of Malaysia.
And that has got to be the strongest performance by far today. And typically, I believe in wushu competition, that's generally the case, is that you see the gold medalists, a big separation in their ability, even in comparison to the second or third place athlete. There's usually that one athlete that really stands up above the crowd. We saw that earlier in the men's Daoshu event, where we had the Chinese athlete perform Daoshu, both when you're looking at his overall performance and difficulty components and lack of errors, was far superior than many of his peers.
That's correct. Deductions will basically make or break an athlete's score for placing in top in the world. And for our last competitor, 9.23, placing him in 4th place. Next up, we have Algeria's Boudad Yassin.
Oh, there we see quite a big stumble. And definitely the judges would have caught that. particularly in this type of competition. They're just waiting for the athlete to lose their balance.
That's correct, Alan. As an international judge myself, when I've judged this competition, a lot of us were just waiting for the athlete just to make one stumble, because there are no deduction codes that are very apparent in these traditional styles other than loss of balance.
So you can see that forward motion and that combination where the performer is shifting his weight and moving towards his target. It was a very big difference in terms of our gold medalists so far. His movement versus, per se, our athlete right now is that stability and center of gravity is really grounded to the floor when the athlete is performing it at a high level.
And you can see in the slow motion, as you were saying, it's more apparent where his center of gravity is.
Much higher, it seems. And you see even on the strikes, the point at the target is just not as accurate. You see it's more where his hands are throwing rather than striking.
And his eyes are not as following his strikes as much. And final score?
8.90, and there were 2 deductions for loss of balance.
Next up from Sweden, we have Joachim Petersen.
Final score is 8.9. 请2号场地1360003号选手入场。Arena number 2, number 136003 athletes, please march in.
And here we see the judges directing the athlete onto the field of play.
So in this competition, having some athletes wearing the long sleeve uniform or the short sleeve, does that make any difference at all in terms of what they represent or how they perform?
I think the longer sleeve helps exhibit the power that is coming from the waist in a lot of these internal styles. So with Joachim having short sleeves, you can still see his power, but just not displayed as
not as apparent.
Not as apparent.
So that's one of the reasons in the terms of the athletes why they choose to wear the long sleeve versus the short sleeve. And also one of the reasons, such as the weaponry in Wushu, why they have flexible blades, is really to help showcase power, targeting, and exertion of force.
There we have it from Sweden's Joachim Petersen. New to the international stage, he's been competing Wushu for 25 years.
But has never competed at the World Championships.
And final score, 8.60. And it looks like we have another no-show. And that will conclude our men's Xingyiquan event with Malaysia's Xingyiquan with placing a gold, and Macau's Pui Seng Chung with the silver, and Christoph Huynh of Germany with the bronze. And shortly, we'll be watching women's Taijijian with 23 competitors.
So in field of play number 2, where we are right now, we get to see 2 of the internal styles of wushu competition. On the men's side, the Xingyiquan, and on the women's side, the Taijijian. What are we looking forward to in the women's Taijijian event?
So the Taijijian, we've already have a lot of strong competitors. We have Suijin Chen of Hong Kong, who's placed a double gold in the last Taolu World Cup, especially in this event, as well as actually earlier this morning she placed first in the Baguazhang,
which was the women's traditional bare hand routine. So now we see the weaponry displayed in Tai Chi, the Taijijian, a field of over 50 competitors. Each routine, what is the time limit that we're looking at and time frame for each performance?
So in Taijijian and in the Tai Chi events, these events are marked by slower, controlled movements, yet explosive at times. And this is often accompanied by music, and opposed to the more external events, which are limited to 1 minute 20 seconds, these events can be 3 to 4 minutes.
And typically, to a lot of the audience members who are not familiar with the internal events of wushu, Tai Chi is one of the most widely practiced martial arts in the world. And it is commonly practiced not only for the martial art purpose, but mainly in the world for health reasons.
That's correct. Tai Chi focuses a lot on the stance work, the breathing techniques, helps improve circulation, really good for the lower body.
And the upper body.
And upper body, that's correct.
So a lot of Tai Chi practitioners, whether they're young or they're old, they're continuing practicing this type of martial art in order to generate blood flow, in order to develop breathing techniques, to improve oxygen circulation in their body, flexibility, and control of their body. So even though we're watching and it seems very, very slow at times, it is very difficult to perform at that pace and rhythm of a routine such as Tai Chi or Shingi or Baguazhang.
That's correct, Alan. And even with Tai Chi events, we do have modern and traditional versions, also having a separate competition, world competition for the Tai Chi events.
And that is because there are so many Tai Chi practitioners and so many different styles of Tai Chi that Tai Chi requires an entire championship on their own. But here at the World Wushu Championship, we see the contemporary form of Tai Chi, which is actually a hybrid of many different forms or styles of Taijijian.
There are about 5 different styles, is that correct, Al?
That's correct, and some of the more popular style, they're named after the family foundation and the family roots that developed the style of Tai Chi. And that is such as the Chen style Tai Chi, the Yang style Tai Chi, the Wu style Tai Chi.
The Wu Hao and the Sun.
Those are the more popular forms.
And would you say that the Yang style is the most popular style of Tai Chi that we often see?
It's actually hard to say nowadays because there's so many people practicing the different forms of Tai Chi, and because of contemporary Wushu and the development of Tai Chi within Wushu, some of the old compulsory forms are actually the most practiced routines globally.
And it looks like we have our awards ceremony for men's Xingyiquan
taking place right now.
And again, in 3rd place, we have Christoph Huynh of Germany. 2nd place, Hui Seng Chong of Macau. And 1st place, Shangyang Chua of Malaysia.
And we have Mr. Fok Chan Hua from Hong Kong, being the special guest to distribute the awards to our winners. So our bronze medalist from Germany, Christoph Huynh. Here we have our silver medalist from Macau, China, Puiseng Chang.
And here's our first place medalist, Xingyiquan of Malaysia.
Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the national anthem of Malaysia.
And there we have it, the completion of the award ceremony for the men's Xingyiquan event. That is the first gold medal for Malaysia in the World Wushu Championships. But not unfamiliar to that, Malaysia is one of the more dominant countries with a very, very strong Wushu program globally in the development of their athletes. So it's no surprise in terms of the position or ranking of this Malaysian athlete.
And continuing in field of play 2, we will be watching women's Taijijian. And we'll be continuing men's Nanchuan in field of play 1 with Paula Amidani and Mario Martinez. I'm Anthony Chen, and here with me is Alan Tang, watching field of play 2.
And here now we welcome in the athletes of the women's Taijijian. We have a field of over 50 athletes competing in today's event.
Arena number 1, number 63004.
And here we see a lot of familiar athletes from previous World Wushu Championships. We have Suijin Chen of Hong Kong, Weijin Li of Canada, Yanning Veritan of Singapore. A lot of familiar faces.
And this is one of the unique events in Wushu where the use of music is used.
That's correct. The use of music with no vocal accompaniment, and I believe that there are no limitations in terms of the music that they can choose.
So how does the music help or dictate the pace of this type of routine?
So the music is designed to match the flow of the style of which the athlete is trying to exhibit.
So at the end of the day, the athlete really is able to choreograph and choose their own music based on their own preference and the way they want to choreograph their routine, I guess.
And here we have our first athlete from Uzbekistan, Zavara Toktaeva.
Has she competed before?
She has in the last World Wushu Championships in Kazan, Russia. So this is her second time competing in this event on the international stage. That was our first movement. Jump front, jump outside into a dragon stance. Dragon's dive.
So there are difficulty components in the Taiji style, and that's one of the differences between contemporary Wushu Taiji versus traditional Taiji. They're taking the elements of the flow, the rhythm, the control, and that's really, I believe, the word that we use for all of these slow, graceful maneuvers is how they can flow and control it while performing these very difficult balances.
And there we've seen just two bounces, one behind the leg and one above the shoulder. And so, Alan, their difficulties are a little bit different from our external Taolu athletes. It seems like they are only taking one step into them.
That's right. In Taiji performance, whether the Taijiquan or the Taijijian, they have their own set of difficulty movements. Whether it's a front jump kick, whether it is a outside jump kick, whether it is a balance, it is a whole set of unique movements to the Taiji style.
And we would expect to see a lot more balances in their routines.
That's right. A big display of the ability in Taiji is through strength, through balance, and through stability is the ability of the athlete to demonstrate these high difficulty balances to showcase all of those elements, including flexibility, obviously, because if you can't have the flexibility, it's very, very difficult to lift your leg so high while balanced.
A lot of these are one-leg balances, too. And so in terms of the A panel, a lot of the deductions are a little bit different, some that are the same. There are some limitations in terms of their deductions. Some particularly being that the fact that Tai Chi is mostly dynamic and there are less static movements other than the balances. And that was our first competitor, Savara Toktaeva of Uzbekistan. There's her first degree of difficulty movements.
So they still must complete that kick with their leg above the shoulder level. But however, it's a very unique landing to the Taiji style.
And that, particularly that stance that she did was considered dragon's dive, also known as the Tai Chi split, where one leg, the front leg, is straight and the other one's bent to no more than a 45-degree angle.
Arena number 143,003 athletes final score is 8.716.
And here we have Savaro awaiting her score,
Arena number 1.
being the first athlete to set the stage for placement.
And as with the other external styles of contemporary wushu, difficulty is still graded, that there are A difficulties, B difficulties, and C. And this isn't what we're talking about the judging panel, but talking about the level of difficulty. There are certain rotations and certain movements that are considered C grade, B grade, and A grade. A grade being the lowest difficulty.
That's correct. And as we were watching earlier today in men's Dao Su, the grade level of degree of rotation is a 360, the B being a 540, 1.5 turns, and a double turn being a 720. And in particularly in Tai Chi, because these athletes only have one step maximum to take before these jumps, the grades have changed the degree of rotation. Is that correct, Alan?
So what type of degree are we looking at in that?
So yeah, we are, in terms of the grade A, that would still be that would actually be a 180-degree turn. The grade B being a 360, and grade C being a 540.
So now for when they're doing a standing inside kick or standing outside kick, we see them landing on that one leg, but they're required just for A group difficulty to do 180 degrees in Tai Chi Chuan as opposed to a 360-degree turn.
That's correct. And just the sheer force and power you need to generate from just a one step into a really high kick and onto one leg is very difficult.
Yes, I see that. And they have to hold that balance after performing that kick, which is very, very unique to Tai Chi. So definitely a lot of strength and balance required to demonstrate those types of maneuvers.
And there's our judging panel with our chief referee up top. Looks like there might be some technical difficulties.
Or the head judge is just ensuring that.
As we were talking earlier, Alan, the scoring system is electronic, and there's a certain amount of time that each judge has before they can agree on a deduction code.
So it is the responsibility of the head judge sometimes to ensure that the judges have caught or have inputted their codes on time within the time frame, and ensuring that there's no big discrepancy between what the score is and what the judges perhaps might have missed or mistimed in their deductions.
And there we see awaiting next from China, Wei Shenju. Wei Shinju from China was only 12 years old when she started to practice wushu. And there we have final score for Savara, 9.09.
Score is 9.09. Arena number 2.
Strong score for our first athlete, well above a 9.
Please marching.
Again, we have Zhu Weixin from China. In 2016, she placed gold medal at the second World Taijijian Championships. She's from the province of Hebei in North China. And Alan, so far we've seen 2 Chinese athletes and 2 golds so far. So we're expecting another strong performance, this especially being their home territory.
Correct, and of course, the birthplace of wushu being in China, they tend to send out some of the strongest athletes to represent the country in World Wushu Championships. Here she preps for her first difficulty, front jump kick with a full 540 degree jump.
Outside into a splits. Here she is prepping for her next jump. Jump front.
Jump kick into a single leg balance, or we call a single raised knee stance.
And so how many different types of transitional jump or transitional positions do they have for these degree of difficulties, Alan?
Well, typically you'll find that really it is either they connect it with a front jump kick into an outside jump kick. They either land in a single leg, or they perform this front jump kick with a 180 degree turn and land into a single knee balance,
So
or a single raised knee stance.
So often you're saying that we will see a one leg stance, single knee balance.
That's correct. And what the name of that movement or that position actually called is the hurdler's split position. So much like how a hurdler jumps the hurdle, that is the split position if they're landing.
And that's the favored jump for the jumping outside lotus, usually over a 360. And that was Wei Shinju of China, finishing off with a crouching stance. You can hear the crowd cheering very loudly for their hometown athlete.
Number 28005 athlete, please marching.
Here we see that front jump kick, then the outside jump kick with an additional half turn. Her final score, 9.71.
with a full A and C score. That makes her combined B score 2.710.
Arena number 2, number 1505 athlete, please march in.
Next up, we have Judy Liu of USA. Also started Tai Chi at age of 11. She competed at the 2018 World Junior Wushu Championships.
And there's also a little bit of a difference in terms of when the female competitors are performing Tai Chi versus the male competitors. For equal value of a score, the female competitors are required to do a slightly less rotation. So as you saw in the previously, the Chinese athlete, that outside, even though she pretty much did a 540-degree turn, the requirement for female athletes is 450 degrees.
That's correct, Alan. That was in addition to the new rules since implemented in 2018.
And there we have that outside jump kick into the hurdler's split. And like other jianshu, there's all of the typical attacks, but in a very graceful way. There's the front jump kick into a 180-degree turn, single raised knee balance. And displaying some of the attributes from the Chen style Tai Chi is you see the explosive strikes that will suddenly appear in her routine. There is a compulsory component in terms of particular movements that represent each style that the athlete must demonstrate during their performance. So although being an optional routine, there are still many compulsory pieces that have to be displayed during a routine.
That's correct, Alan. There are about 8 different compulsory routines that are featured in some of these movements, in some of these routines. There we see Judy setting up for her next jumps. Jump front into single leg knee balance. As you were saying, here's some of the quicker, explosive Chen-style movements. More of a medium open frame. And here we have a bounce, squatting bounce behind the leg.
Very difficult, and it takes a lot of flexibility to perform that movement. There's a front raised leg balance.
And Tai Chi definitely is a lot more difficult than the external styles, just because the leg being above the shoulder is
The flexibility required and the strength required to do that.
and the length of how much they have to hold the leg. And that was USA's Judy Liu. We're waiting her score. Third athlete of 23 competitors in women's Taijijian.
So that combination, there is a difference between the balance which is raised in front and a balance that is crossed behind, different values in terms of their scores. But she has completed all of her difficulty, and her final score for Judy is 9.513.
A very strong score, and as we've seen in this competition, a lot of the scores above a 9.6 can put you in the top 3. So
And again, like any other competition, the most important is not to attain any deductions. So when you do your form perfectly without any deductions, it's really based off of that overall performance mark, which at that point really puts it into any of the athletes' grasp.
Next up from Taipei, we have Yi Huilin. And in our other field of play one, we have men's Nanquan. And currently, we have a Chinese competitor competing, which is why you hear the crowd getting louder. And here she sets up for her first jump front to jump outside 450 into her hurdler split.
Little shaky on her balance. And that's how you are very uniquely able to identify the level of the athletes, is although it's very, very slow, very graceful, you're able to appreciate the
Level of
difficulty
control.
it is and the control required to perform those types of movements.
Arena number 1, number 7891 athlete, please march in.
That was considered the low balance with leg stretched forward. Here's the front jump kick into a single raised knee stance. But still, as her demonstrating these difficulties, they still have to display the power and the contact point with that kick.
That's correct. A lot of these athletes are required to slap their foot above the shoulder to prevent themselves from getting a deduction.
There's the low balance with the leg crossed behind.
And straight into a single leg bounce kick.
That's actually a combination, Anthony, is when they cross their leg behind to do that low balance and then they follow it with that raised leg. It's considered a combination in Taiji. But also what they could do is to combine that with a jumping outside kick into a single leg raised leg balance, and that actually provides them with even higher marks.
And as we were saying, one of the main differences between the external and the internal athletes are the types of difficulty movements that they choose. The Tai Chi being a little bit more difficult with only one step into any kind of degree of rotation. So a lot of these Tai Chi athletes, we can see them choosing more balances instead of aerial
jumping
jumps.
techniques.
Yep. And there we have it from Yi Huilin of Taipei. So far we've seen 3 athletes, all placing above a 9.0.
There's a kick. Completion of the rotation. Very difficult landing into that hurdler split. Into that single leg balance.
And there we have it for Yi Huilin, a 9.40, putting her in 3rd place. Up next, we have Pui Keho of Macau. We've already seen her earlier this morning in the women's Bagua Zhang event, also in internal traditional style, where she placed 4th. And here she is just awaiting the start of her music. So Alan, what are your thoughts about the music we've heard so far? Have the athletes been matching up with what they've chosen?
It's a relatively important note when they have the music to kind of design and to choreograph the routine based on the pace. But as well, it is good and helpful to the athlete because in such a slow and graceful environment for Taijijian, it actually gives them that rhythm and allows them to follow the pace of the music in their demonstration. So not only does the music help them, but as well, it helps the audience appreciate the movements and the different rhythm that they are performing in their routine.
In essence, it kind of paints the story for the audience.
Correct. Very graceful landing. And I think that's one of the things and elements you're looking for in that move is, although they're doing a jump kick, is how graceful is the athlete landing that transition. Preparation for, I believe, a outside. Oh, that's actually a front kick towards the head and landing. And we couldn't see it from that angle on the camera, but the goal of that kick is for the toe to actually reach to the top of the forehead.
So this being a straight sword event, are we looking for the same criterias as the external events?
Some of the movements are very similar in terms of the sword movement. And as well with the straight sword, you're looking at the importance always not only on the sword hand, but as well as the control hand, which is the left hand. And those are very famous in terms of the trait of the straight sword is what we call the straight sword hand. As you can see, the closure of the 2 fingers must be held throughout the routine.
And there she has a leg bounce behind the front.
Followed by that combination of the front leg raise balance. And is that one of the things the judges are still looking for throughout the routine?
That's correct. As we enter the 2018 year, they've introduced new rules that requires deductions on the hand movements, and the sword finger being one of them. And you'll see that all the athletes are required to keep the index and the middle finger together, and the thumb has to be covering both the ring and the pinky.
So at any point during a routine, if the athlete loses control and forgets about that sword hand, that they'll get a deduction for it.
That's correct. And as I was saying earlier, because this is the Tai Chi events are generally dynamic and there are no static points, that's usually where the deduction code would happen. But because they are constantly moving, the judges can deduct at any point that they see. But there is a limitation in the Tai Chi events of a maximum of 3 deductions for one type of quality of movement.
Arena number 1, number 107001 S8, please match in.
And that was Macau's Pui Kei Ho, who's already competed in women's Baguazhang earlier this morning.
There's that front jumping stretch kick. Her final score, 8.946.
And it looks like she has a deduction of 0.45 in her Group C. And that is a jump outside 360, being under rotation. Next up from Myanmar, we have Myat No Yang. This is her second international competition, her first being the 18th Asian Games in 2018. There's her first difficulty jump front into jump outside to hurdle split. Here she is prepping for her next difficulty. Jump inside 180 into a single leg knee balance.
Very nicely done. All of these single leg balances, they're very, very difficult, especially to control after that jumping maneuver. And you'll typically see that's one of the areas in which most of the athletes who get deducted or lose marks will be in. Here's our front extension with a drop. Very strong. You can see the positioning of her leg is above the horizontal position, which is the typical requirement, and she has it way above that mark.
And like you said earlier today, Alan, it's very important that the athlete overdoes it sometimes, just so it's very clear to the judges that they are meeting the requirements of the difficulty movement.
There is the behind low balance with the leg cross behind, followed by
An outside kick with the 180
the
turn.
twist. And that is a B grade combination.
There she sets up into jump front. Oh,
and there's a miss on her landing of that single leg balance. So does she lose her mark for both the difficulty and the landing on that move?
No, actually, she only loses the points for the landing.
But because the kick was achieved, she'll still receive the mark for the actual jump.
Correct. And in most cases, the athletes, when they do a kick or a rotation, as long as they meet the rotation and don't fall, they will at least get the rotation. But a slip or a sway would prevent them from getting that transitional score. And that was her crouching stance as her finisher. And there we have a repeat of her jump front, jump outside into 360. And here we can see she over rotates just to ensure that the judges do not deduct her.
She just held that balance there. And she was doing quite well all the way up until that final difficulty where she had that bounce off in the landing of the movement. And her final mark is 9.123. So a very strong performance, but she had the deduction for that final landing, and as well, obviously, one for loss of balance. And a secondary deduction. A code
For her sword
04
Yep.
for her sword finger.
And so that's the first deduction of this event for the sword finger, and I expect to see a lot.
So it's really up to the athlete to control that hand and to show the judges that they are able to maintain that control throughout the routine.
That's correct. Up next, we have Korea's Yu Jong Choi. And she competed earlier this morning as well in the women's Bagwazang, placing second, giving the first medal to Korea
in this World Championship.
And Yu Jong going into her low bounce.
Leg cross behind, followed by the same combination of the leg raise.
Jump front to jump outside
360 degrees
into the hurdler split.
Very nice. There's her front extension balance.
That was a jump front into a single leg knee balance. And there we see that series of aggressive yet controlled Chen style movements.
Very nice performance by the Korean athlete.
Currently, she'll need to break a 9.4 to make third place.
Arena number 118.003 as its final score is 9.016.
请1号场地13900号选手入场。
Arena number 1139002 athlete.
And the final score for the athlete from Korea, 9.600, putting her into second place, a very, very strong performance.
9.6, a very high score. And as we were saying earlier today, all the top 3 athletes place or score at least a 9.6. But up next we have Hong Kong's Suijin Chen, who was the gold medalist in the women's Bagua this morning. She placed a double gold at the 2018 Taolu World Cup in women's Taijijian and Taijijian.
So we can expect that she should have a very strong performance, as long as she maintains her composure and execute those difficulty components in the routine.
And there's the raised leg bounce above the shoulder. And a jump front stretch kick into a single leg. And then particularly in this transitional jump, it's not a requirement to bring the knee above the waist if you're just doing a single leg landing. And there's her jump front into jump outside 450.
Very nice strength in the rotation of that jump. And it's very beautiful to see the difference in rhythm between some of those difficulty movements and then the gracefulness following and leading into it.
I agree. The rhythm is very crucial when it comes to Tai Chi. Being able to show the fast, explosive movements as well as the slow, graceful control. There's a crouching stance. And here we have the music speeding up, alerting us of the change in rhythm. And Alan, would you say there's a lot of waist movements when it comes to Tai Chi, especially in terms of the strikes?
Definitely, it's not only about the waist, it's the core of the body. And that's where in Wushu, we're always talking about the core power and strength coming from the midsection of the waist and torso. And that's where all the power is exerted from, along with the breathing exercises that is trained and developed in Wushu in general, and in particular in the Tai Chi style. Yes.
And there's a replay of her jump front into single leg landing.
And her final score is 9.59, putting her in third place.
That puts her actually right behind Yu Jung Choi, in which they were switched in the last event.
And next we have Wei Jian Lee from Canada.
This is her third World Wushu Championships. First time being in Jakarta, Indonesia in 2015. Jump outside 360 into a single leg knee balance. Setting up for a jump front into jump outside 360.
Into a hurdler split. Front extension.
Into a single leg balance above the shoulder.
Front jump into a single raised knee balance again.
So far, very controlled performance. Quick, explosive movements. Into your crouching stance. Finishing off her routine.
Well
So Alan,
done by Wei Jen.
what are your thoughts?
Very happy with her performance. She actually trains with me, so it's a little quiet there watching her performance, but she did very well and landed her difficulty, which very hard. Maintaining her balance. There we see the 360 camera into that single leg balance.
And Alan, she's come a long way since her first World Wushu Championships.
That's correct, because she actually started demonstrating and competing in the external styles, the contemporary wushu, doing broadsword and guanshu, then transitioned into Taijijian only in the last few years.
And Wei Jen's final score, 8.87.
So one deduction for her Group C difficulty, but also one deduction for loss of balance and
then
her sword hand.
And then another deduction for kicking height. Also a very common deduction code that you will see in contemporary wushu is the 30 code, and that's where the athlete is required to kick above the shoulder or make contact with the foot during the aerial kick. Next up from Singapore, we have Yan Ning Vera Tan. She was a very strong competitor in the last World Wushu Championships in Kazan, which gave her eligibility to compete in the Taolu World Cup in 2018, where she placed third in women's Taijijian. And this being the straight sword event, we'll see how she competes.
Number 10588 athlete's final score is 8.593.
请1号场地2005-01号选手入场。
Arena number 1.
There's the low balance with leg crossed behind.
There's the single leg kick balance, well above the shoulder. And here she sets up for her first set of jumps.
That is a front stretch kick into single leg balance. Very difficult because during that kick, she requires her toe to make contact with her head.
And that's right, and the bottom leg is required to be straight at the apex of this jump. Jump front slap kick into a single leg knee balance. Jump front into 360 jump outside hurdler split. One of the common deductions for the straight sword event is what was called the sword finger. And as you were saying, Alan, the two fingers have to be together, the
Index finger and a
index
middle
finger and the
finger.
middle finger, and the thumb has to be covering both the ring and pinky.
And is that the same case for the regular Jianshu as well, Anthony?
That is also the case. Straight sword being unique as a weapon covers both external and internal events with the same deduction code. And there is also a different requirement when it comes to the palm for the Tai Chi events. While the external routines require the four fingers to be together and the thumb to be bent, for the Tai Chi events, the palm is required to be loose and round and the fingers not touching. And here we have a close-up. And actually you can see over there her sword finger is a little bit lacking in terms of her thumb covering the small and ring finger. And final score, 9.540 for Yanning Veritan, placing her in fourth. And next up, we have Thieman Tran of Vietnam. She placed silver in the 2018 Taolu World Cup in Tai Chi Chuan, so she's a strong competitor. We can say almost rival to the previous competitor from Singapore. We'll see if she's able to go above a 9.59 to put herself in third place. jump front to jump outside 360 into a hurdler split. Very strong landing and execution. Low leg bounce, cross behind. Here she sets up. A jump front, 180. Looks like she has a slight loss of balance with her torso going forward and back. So, Alan, in that case, she would receive a full C score because she didn't skip. And of course, the C is not looking whether they're skipping or if they're swaying, but the A judges are looking for that sway. Jump front into a single leg knee balance. Alan, the positioning of the finger on the guard of the sword is quite important in straight sword. Is that correct?
Correct, because the straight sword is designed in a particular way, whereas your index finger is placed on the edge of the guard to control the sword, but must not make contact with any part of the blade, which is designed to be sharp.
And a common mistake we will be seeing with
The
lesser
competitor's
level
index
athletes.
finger
Correct.
touching the actual blade of the sword.
That was Thi Minh Huynh Tran of Vietnam. As we await her score, we still have about 13 competitors left, roughly, with China taking first, Korea being second, and Hong Kong being third.
So there is the deduction for the loss of balance, and as well a deduction
For the crouching stance. And the requirement for the crouching stance is that the big leg of the crouching leg needs to be in contact with the calf, or the extended leg needs to be completely straight, and both toes are parallel, or less than 135 degrees to parallel. Up next from Brunei, we have Basma Lakhar. Basma is 16 years old, fairly new. She's been training Tai Chi for half her life, since she was 8. Jump outside slap to a 360 turn. Straight into a setup for jump front, jump outside, 360 hurler split. And very difficult, these Tai Chi athletes have it for only executing their jumps with one or no step. And there's her single leg kick well above the shoulder, even above the head. Jump front, looks like she missed her landing, placing it on the ground. That's gonna cost her in her A and C. Good control of her kicks and her center of gravity. Yet a little tight on the shoulders. That's a very low crouching stance. And again, the criteria being the thigh in contact with the calf for the crouching side and the front leg being extended straight. Here we can see it in the replay. Her jump front well above the shoulder. And then her jump outside, 360. Well over 360 as well. And here's her single leg kick balance above the head. Final score for Basma, 9.166.
And a deduction of that slight wobble there.
Next up from Singapore, we have Lin Yingho, a bronze medalist in the World Wushu Championships in women's compulsory Taijijian.
Arena number 1, number 63003 athlete, please marching.
There she is executing her low leg bounce, cross from behind into a kicking balance. Setting up for her next set. Jump front, jump outside 360 into hurdler split. What do you think of the kicking height on her jump outside?
It's a tad low, it seems. But again, sometimes because that is what the judges are looking for, but in the criteria, 2 of the 3 judges have to determine that same deduction at within that 3-second period. It's whether or not they agree on that from the different angles they sit at.
You'd have to agree on the kicking leg is very crucial when it comes to these degree of difficulty. There's her kicking balance.
Arena number 1, number 63003 has its final score is 9.61.
请6号场地8800号选手入场。
Arena number 1, number 88002 athlete, please march in.
Jump front into single leg knee balance.
One critique with all of her jump kicks is it seems as though many of them are right at the borderline of the shoulder height. If it is below the shoulder, do they get the mark for the difficulty, Anthony?
For the difficulty, the requirement is that the jump has to be above, or has to be executed in the air, has to have the required steps, which is 1 or 0, and the kicking has to be above the waist. So the difficulty is looking at the height of the kick in terms of only the waist, while the quality of movement judges, which are the A, are looking for the quality of the kick, which has to be above the shoulder. And now we have the luxury of seeing some of the close-ups from the camera angles, and we can see a lot of these athletes do have their fingers not always pressed on the thumb.
Yeah.
And the ring and small finger.
Correct, and it's one of those points where that it is whether or not the judges also catch it at the correct timing. So even though it is a requirement, it's something where it's almost whether you're lucky that you get caught or not. And there, actually, in the slow-mo, we see very clearly that her kick was below the waist.
And Alan, you would say that some of these athletes do place some of their movements away from the judges.
And there, she's caught for her
kicking
sword
height.
finger, her sword finger.
Arena number 2, number 73008 athlete, please march in. Arena number 1, number 88002 has its final score is 9.7.
Next up, we have Japan's Shiho Saito.
Arena number 1, number 153AL1 athlete, please march in.
So she was caught for the jumping height of her kick. Japan is very strong in the Taiji event. How did she place in previous competitions?
Shiho Saito's been at the 2017 World Wushu Championships. She placed a bronze medal in this particular event and a silver at the 2018 Taolu World Cup just last year. jump front stretch kick into single leg landing. See a slight bobble. See if that was enough for the judges to deduct her movement. There we have the kick in front into low level balance and straight into a heel kick balance. Jump front into single leg knee balance. Her sword work is very controlled, making it look like an extension of her body.
Very good control, and especially on these explosive parts during the routine, you see the speed and power, but very clear in terms of her targeting. And accuracy of where the power is directed to.
Now we'll say that was a strong performance by Japan's Shiho Saito. She'll need to break a 9.59 to be in the top 3. And there's that replay of her jump outside 360. And then final score is 9.583 for Shiho Saito of Japan. That puts her in 4th place. Looks like we have one no-show from China. And we are now watching Nepal's Mina Glan. This is her first World Wushu Championships and first international competition. Here she's setting up for her first set of difficulties. A jump outside into single leg.
Followed by a front jump kick into the outside.
Lotus 360 into a hurdler split. takes a lot of practice and experience to be able to control your balance and your knees and your lower body when it comes to the Tai Chi events.
And that's one of the things that audience members not familiar with Tai Chi might not be appreciative in terms of their training. There's the outside and then a rotation. So quite a bit of hesitation in terms of her flow and rhythm on that part. I'm sure the judges will take note of that.
Jump front into single leg bounce.
Loss of balance
another
there.
Loss of balance.
So she will lose her difficulty marks on that maneuver there.
As well as a deduction code for swaying and shuffle. And that was 2 of them, one for her legs and another for her upper body. And that deduction code being allowable consecutively for the same mistake. Here's the front squatting balance. And in some of these power movements, what we're really looking for is the generation of power from the waist and from the core. And Alan, would you say that she has a good control of her power?
Well, it's demonstrated, especially in this field of competition where there are many, many good competitors, is you're able to see quite a bit of that difference in terms of the athletes which are using their core and using their hip power to generate force versus just what we call movement. So you see in slow motion, there's her outside kick. This one, she did a very good landing. Front jump kick, and then into the 360 reversal. But going back to that, in Chinese we call dantian, is where the breathing comes from, the diaphragm. And it's very clear when the Tai Chi competitors are doing and performing their routine at such a slow pace that you're able to see that power come from the hip and the core. So many different deductions in terms of her balance, in terms of her kicks being below the shoulder level, dropping her score down to 8.373.
And next up here we have Malaysia's Sydney Chin. There's Sydney setting up for her first set of difficult movements. Jump front stretch kick into a single leg balance.
There's
Jump.
a sway in the landing on her jump kick there. The low balance with leg cross behind.
Arena number 1, number 07005, assets final score is 6.993.
1号场地21003号选手入场。
Arena number 1, number 21003, athlete please marching.
And that's Sydney Chin from Malaysia.
We saw a series of deductions already from our point of view, and that may cause her from the podium. There we have it, 8.963.
Her final score, 8.963. A deduction for loss of balance and as well not achieving her first difficulty during her routine.
Arena number 2, number 61005, athlete please marching.
Next up from Indonesia, we have Alexandra Kalista Setiawan. She's been practicing wushu for 11 years. This is her first international competition.
Arena number 1, number 21003, athlete's final score is 9.48.
请1号场地62103号选手入场。
Arena number 1, number 62003, athlete please marching.
jump front, jump outside into 180. This being a lower level difficulty jump, it's something the judges will also consider in the overall performance. But very well executed. Very controlled. But wouldn't you say her movements are just a tad stiff?
They are, and for some of these athletes, that plays a big part in terms of their experience and the amount of time that they might have been practicing Tai Chi. Is you'll see in our top 3 and top even 6 competitors, very clear indication of where their power is generated from and the use of their core and their hips in terms of their movement. So here, her performance is much more stiff and more movement rather than the Tai Chi flavor and rhythm behind it.
That's right. And a lot of static movements, which is not very common and is not supposed to be common in Tai Chi events, unless the athlete is trying to hold a balance. And that was Indonesia's Alexandra Kalisa Setiawan. There's that jump front to jump outside. 180. Sorry, 450.
Very strong front jump kick. And her final score is 9.523. No deductions in her Group A or Group C scoring.
Next up from Hong Kong, we have Juanita Mock.
Arena number 15351S. Its final score is 8.67. 请1号场地9504号选手入场。Arena number 1, number 95 please march in.
Very strong control by Juanita Mock. There's her front leg balance into a squat.
Then a 180-degree turn.
Jump front into a 360. Jump front stretch kick into single leg knee balance, right into a kicking leg balance. You can tell she's very confident of her difficulties. Jump front into single leg bounce. Change in rhythm. Very explosive yet controlled.
And you see her expression and her intensity. Very nice movement there. It's very much in sync with her weapon.
And with the music, it seems.
And as well, showcasing a very confident appeal to her form.
And well displayed. A very strong performance by Juanita Mok. Still, she'll need at least a 9.6 to break third place.
But very doable with a performance such as that. Let's see if the judges agree.
And again, we have China's Wei Shinju in first place, Yu Zhang Choi of Korea in second place, and Suijin Chen in third place from Hong Kong. And as we finish up our women's Taijijian event with 5 more competitors, you can probably still watch men's Nantren in Field of Play 1 with Paula Amadani and Mario Martinez.
And the final score for Juanita Mok, 9.626. Very well done.
And that pushes her team member, Suijin Chen, to 4th. and Korea down to 3rd place.
Arena number 1, level 152001 athlete, please march in.
A full A score NC.
220807. Arena number 2, number 228070.
Up next from Brunei, we have Guat Lian Ang. This is her first International Wushu Championships. She's competed on the world stage at the FISU World University Games in 2018, placing 3rd in this event. There's her front leg bounce into a squat, straight into a kicking balance. There's her setting up. Jump front outside 360 into hurdler split. And slight loss of bounce in the back leg there. The low stamping kicking balance into 180 turn. Jump front 180 to single leg knee raise. Jump front single leg knee balance. There's her with very controlled horse stance movements. Now her performance is not quite up to par with the other athletes we've seen so far.
No, it's a very tough. It's a very tough division, the women's Taijijian, even though we have 34 athletes, but a majority of them are very, very good. But just in terms of the fundamentals in Tai Chi and the flow of her rhythm and exertion of force from her dantian or from her waist. It's not as flowing.
And here we can see a little bit, some of her movements are quite stiff.
Correct.
And Tai Chi being required to be a little bit more flow, to have a little bit more flow. She has kind of a problem with being a little bit too tight.
The competition for arena number 2 has ended. All the judges, please stand up.
And there we have her final score, 9.020, with a deduction in C of
Of
0.1,
loss of balance and a code 17.
which is another as a balance deduction.
All the judges, please march out.
And there we can see, as you were saying, her overall performance being a little bit lacking in terms of flow with a 2.3. And most of the higher level athletes being above 2.55. Next up from the Philippines, we have Agatha Christensen Wong. This is her third World Wushu Championships. A silver medalist in 2015 in compulsory Taijijian. Jump front, jump outside, 360 into hurdler split. Jump front stretch kick into single leg bounce. Into a kicking bounce, into a squatting bounce behind, from behind. And an outside lotus kick.
With the rotation, there was a slight loss of balance there. You can see with the bottom foot where it just wobbled on the carpet slightly.
And that was quite risky, linking so many required difficulties together like that. But at the same time, allows the athlete to move through the difficulties so they can focus on the martial element of their routine. Jump front into single leg knee bounce. Did see a slight skip right there. See what the judges think about that.
It's very clear when you're watching the Tai Chi is that mixture of soft movements and hard movements. So when you're watching Agatha right now, these explosive movements just seem a bit tight, and they don't seem for me, to feel that the power is being generated from the relaxation. A few of the strikes seem just a bit too hard.
I'd have to agree. It almost seems that her power isn't fully extended at every strike.
And as well isn't as relaxed or being generated from a relaxed start point.
Final score for Agatha, 9.353.
And she has a code 25 deduction. Which one is that, Anthony?
A code 25 deduction has to do with a leg movement. And so the deductions are all grouped by the 10s, the 1s being the balance, the 2 being leg techniques, the 3 being jumping movements, 5 being stance work.
Oh, I didn't know that. So anything with a code 2 to start is a leg deduction. So something
That's
to do
correct.
with the kick.
Yep, and in this case, this was a non-aerial kick deduction.
So
this
where
was
kicking leg was bent when, or she did not slap her foot during
right,
the kick.
and it has to be audible for the judges to hear. Next up, we have Sarah Hussein of Egypt. Another fairly young athlete, only 18 years old. She competed in the 2016 Taichi World Championships in Poland, placing second in her age group. Jump front, jump outside 316 to hurdler split. There's Sarah setting up. She's jump front, 180 turn. Looks like she hopped and lost her bounce a little bit. It's gonna cost her at least 0.3. This is the low leg bounce from behind leg. Another loss of balance.
Little hard on the landing there. And you'll see a lot of the top Tai Chi competitors, they either flow right into that one leg landing or they actually compress into it, which is very beautiful.
And that was Egypt's Sarah Hussein. We're down to our last competitor. And there are the replays of her loss of balance.
And her final score is 8.566. Several deductions, primarily for losses of balance and for kicking below shoulder height.
请2号场地153-004号选手入场。
And our final competitor is Conley Tran Thi of Vietnam. In 2017, she placed double silver in the Tai Chi events. So we're finishing off with a potential strong competitor that can take top 3. There's her first jump, well executed. Jump front stretch kick into single leg landing.
Front extension balance, followed by her prep.
Jump outside,
Very
jump
nice
front,
combination.
jump. Yeah, jump inside, jump front, jump outside. That's one of her signature combinations for her difficulties.
So it really isn't a combination, but it is 2 separate difficulties just put into one.
Exactly. She's the only Tai Chi athlete to put those levels together. Jump front into single leg knee balance. And there we have it from our final competitor.
Con Li Tran from Vietnam.
She needs at least a 9.61 to make the podium. And final score is 9.566 for Vietnam. And that concludes the women's Taijijian event with Wen Xinju of China with a gold, Juanita Mock of Hong Kong with a silver, and Yu Jong Choi of Korea with a third with bronze medal. And this concludes our field of play 2.
We
And
will also follow up with the award ceremony for both the men's Nanquan and the women's Taijijian event.
And just to recap earlier this session, we had men's Xingyiquan with Shangyang Chua of Malaysia with the gold, Pui Song Chung of Macau with the silver, and Christoph Huyn of Germany with the bronze.
So stay tuned and view our award ceremony, which will be coming up in just a few moments.
喂，小李，小李。啊，撕掉吗？好了，我给小李打个电话。哎，喂，小李，要撕掉吧？对，第4套。哎，第4套1号有啊有啊有啊有啊有啊有啊有啊。